Today, we're digging into qualitative research. It's this incredible method for understanding the messy, complicated, and fascinating parts of being human. But what happens when you throw a powerful new tool like artificial intelligence into the mix? Well, things get really interesting. Let's get into it.
This question is really the whole point. Sure, numbers and stats can tell you what happened, but if you want to understand the why behind a decision or the how of an experience, well, a spreadsheet just isn't going to cut it. You need to go deeper. And that's exactly where qualitative research shines.
All right, so let's start with the basics. What are we actually talking about here? What makes this type of research so different and, frankly, so powerful?
Okay, a couple of key phrases to zero in on here are naturalistic inquiry and lived experiences. See, this isn't about research in some sterile lab. It's about getting out into the real world, understanding people where they are, and listening to their stories. The data here isn't a number. It's the human experience itself.
This is probably the clearest way to think about the difference. Quantitative research might tell you, say, how many people clicked on a button. But qualitative research is what tells you why they clicked it, or maybe why they hesitated. It tells you how it made them feel. One is about measuring, the other's all about exploring meaning.
And these are really the core ingredients of good qualitative work. You're going for richness of data, deep, detailed stories, not just simple yes or no answers. It also embraces subjectivity, recognizing that the researcher is part of the process, and that's managed through something called reflexivity, where the researcher's constantly checking their own biases. And finally, it's all about context. A single word can mean a million different things depending on the culture, the time, and the place.
So, you might be wondering, if we aren't using hard numbers and statistics, how do we know if the research is any good? How do we know it's not just, one person's opinion? It's a fantastic question, and there's a really solid system for it.
And yeah, this is the question everyone asks, right? Without a margin of error or some statistical test, what's to stop a researcher from just seeing what they want to see? Well, it turns out there's a whole framework designed to make sure that doesn't happen.
And it all comes down to this one really important word: trustworthiness. It's the gold standard in this world. It's a totally different way of thinking about quality and rigor, one that's built for understanding meaning, not just for measurement.
So first up is credibility. This is pretty straightforward. Is what the researcher is saying a believable and accurate reflection of what the participants actually said and did? One way they ensure this is through a cool technique called triangulation, where they use multiple sources of data, like interviews plus observations plus documents, to see if the story holds up.
Next, we have transferability. Now, in this kind of research, you're not trying to say your findings apply to everyone on the planet. Instead, you provide what's called a thick description. So instead of just saying the office was busy, the researcher would describe the sounds, the smells, the way people were talking to each other, all the rich detail. That way, you can decide if these insights might apply or transfer to a similar office you know.
Then there's dependability. This one's all about being transparent. It basically means the researcher has to show their work. They have to document every decision they made, every turn they took. The goal is that another researcher could look at their trail of breadcrumbs and understand exactly how they got to their conclusions.
And finally, we have confirmability. This is crucial. It ensures that the findings are actually rooted in the data, not just in the researcher's head. And they often prove this with an audit trail, where they can point to a specific quote or specific observation for every single interpretation they make. It proves their conclusions didn't just appear out of thin air.
This TACT framework is a great visual for how it all locks together. You can see on the left how things like transparent data collection lead to something called audibility, which is basically just a combination of the dependability and confirmability we just talked about. When you combine that with transferability and credibility, you get to the big goal: trustworthiness. It's a whole system designed to create research that is robust and rigorous.
Okay, so now let's jump into the present day, because like pretty much every other part of our lives, qualitative research is being totally shaken up by artificial intelligence. And this is creating some really exciting new opportunities, but also some pretty serious questions we need to think about.
On the one hand, AI is just an incredible assistant. I mean, it can automatically transcribe hours of interviews, saving researchers days or even weeks of tedious work. It can help organize huge, messy data sets. It can even help spot preliminary patterns in the data. Plus, it's making research more inclusive with amazing translation and accessibility tools.
Let's take a specific software tool like NVivo, for example.
It's brilliant at organizing data, coding it efficiently, even creating charts and maps to visualize it. But, and this is a huge but, look at that column on the right. For every amazing thing the software can do, a human researcher is still needed for context, for interpretation, for refinement. The takeaway is pretty simple. The machine is great at organizing, but the human is essential for understanding.
And that right there brings us to what might be the most important part of this whole conversation. Because for all of its incredible power, there are some fundamental things that AI just can't do.
This quote from the source material really just nails it, doesn't it? At the end of the day, qualitative research is about getting at the heart of what it means to be human. All the messy, emotional, complex stuff. And AI, well, it doesn't have empathy. It doesn't have lived experiences. It can process words, but it can't truly feel them.
And that's where we have to be incredibly careful, because the risks are real. An AI can be completely tone-deaf to cultural nuance. It can famously hallucinate, literally just making up facts and sources. It can also repeat and even amplify the biases that exist in the data it was trained on. All of this poses a massive threat to academic integrity. Where does the human's work end and the machine's begin?
And this isn't just some abstract debate. Major academic publishers, like Elsevier, are already drawing a very clear line in the sand. They're saying that authorship comes with responsibility and accountability, things a machine simply cannot have. The message is clear. A human being has to be in the driver's seat.
So, if you take one thing away from our discussion today, let it be this. AI is an unbelievably powerful tool. It's an assistant, a lever that can help researchers work faster and at a greater scale. But it is not, and it cannot be, a replacement for human insight, human empathy, and human interpretation.
So the future is going to be a blend of both. It's about using AI for what it's great at, all that heavy lifting, the organization, the efficiency. But we must always rely on humans for the things only we can do. That deep, reflexive thinking, that nuanced analysis, and most importantly, the ethical oversight.
Which leaves us with a final, really big question to think about. As these AI tools get smarter and more capable, that line between being an assistant and being a creator is going to get blurrier and blurrier. Figuring out exactly where to draw that line, well, that's going to be one of the great challenges for researchers and for all of us in the years ahead.